This is your permission slip to speak your truth, own your story, and laugh through the chaos. Welcome to the Transparently Jordan podcast.
This is Radiant Voices Media.
Can you work around it? So, is it that you do a strength session, like a shorter, more compact, targeted session before you then go and do a short run, so that your total session time might be still what you were going to do for your run, but you've now got a bit of strength training in there beforehand.
Endurance isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and deeply personal. On today's episode, I'm joined by Anthony Alder, an endurance athlete who has tackled some tough races, from marathons to Ironmans to grueling ultramarathons that push the limits of human endurance. We dive into the mindset it takes to go the distance, the training and nutrition strategies that fueled his performance, and how he balances this demanding lifestyle with everyday life. Whether you're training for your first 5K or your next Ironman, Anthony's journey is packed with insights, inspiration, and real talk about what it takes to keep showing up mile after mile. Let's get into today's episode. Maybe if you don't mind getting started, but just letting everybody know, because of course you have a history with, Ultramans and Ironmans and things like that.
Yep.
Maybe if you don't mind just giving the listeners a bit about your backstory and where it all started with you with endurance sports.
Yeah, sure. So I did triathlons when I was younger, mainly through uni. So when I got to uni, sort of, don't know what pulled me into them, but just sort of those ones at West Lakes, etc. And yeah, I've always admired Kona, and that was sort of like, wow. And through uni, sort of joked around with a couple of friends that, well, if you ever do an Ironman, I'll do it as well. And then many years later, had a friend just send me her registration, a good friend Alana, and then 20 minutes later I registered. So that's kind of like how I really got into the Ironman. But through uni, one of my other friends, she was always long distance runner, and did the 100-mile and all those sorts of crazy things, and never thought that would be me. But sort of 20 years later, that's definitely where I'm heading. So
I feel like that's kind of like the story of endurance athletes is they kind of just find it and they do one and then it kind of snowballs from there.
Yeah.
What did you do prior to the sports? Like, were you like a footy player, or was it more strength based stuff, or
No,
not?
I think it's very different generation now where gyms are very much a part of the culture. So for me, it was like I did a lot of cycling. I didn't own my first car until I was in uni, and so I used to just ride everywhere. And as a kid, that was my thing. Go out. We lived at Wattle Park, so just go for long walks out into the nature side. But yeah, I used to ride everywhere. So I worked at Macca's as a kid and ride to and from up the hill, and ride to and from school. So yeah, always been a cyclist. And then strip bikes, rebuild bikes, put, different bits together. But then through uni, did a little bit more structure with running. Never did gym, never did strength, which was probably, I'd love to see now what this generation's going to be like in 10, 15 years' time, because gym is such a part of the culture. But then, the trail running sort of came about because, friends like, oh, we're going to do Euroball Ultra, you should do it. And you're like, oh, all right. And so I did Euroball Ultra before I did my first road marathon. And then had a mate who I was living with as well, who was a marathon runner. And so, just started doing that sort of things as well. But I'm a big guy. I'm a heavy guy. So I've never had it in my head that I'll be competitive as such. But the ultras, it doesn't really matter. You see all sorts of body shapes and sizes out there, and different ages as well. Like, a lot of the ultras, the 60-year-olds are in there, and they're giving it a red hot crack as well. So I think the ultras are because it's that lower heart rate, lower in, it's just endurance and that mental capacity. It's kind of a bit more for everybody. Whereas to be competitive at the marathon, you've got to be, top of the top of the runners sort of group. So I'm there for shits and giggles, so to
Yeah.
speak. So
Yeah.
just for fun and to keep myself active.
Yeah, awesome. How did you find, I guess, difference between the ultra and the marathon? Like, because you ran the ultra or you've run
Yeah.
an ultra first, and
Yep.
that's also interestingly, I find a common story too. People have done an ultra first and then have done like a road race or a marathon, and find it massively different. How
Yep.
was that like for you?
For me, I found the road marathon really like tough mentally. When you're on the trails, you've got that pace variability, the scenery variability. You can kind of get a bit distracted and enjoy the moment. Whereas when you're on a flat road run, you change your pace a little bit and you notice it and you can feel it and you can feel the niggles and that there's no, like I've rolled an ankle on an ultra about 30 odd K in and been able to get to the end because you've got that variability in terrain and you can walk a bit and etc. Whereas I feel like on a road, it's just can be monotonous, but it's just, there's no break from that cycle. So I find mentally the marathon harder. So
I've heard that a lot too. And I guess like you brought a key point there, the terrain is quite different and quite specific because, if you one thing like I give a tip if I have a runner come in to me as a physio, they want to get back running faster. It's okay, well, switch up that terrain, right? Instead of running on roads, there's other ways that you can still continue to run because it's less impact and easier on your joints and you're using different muscles and stuff like that. So I find that quite interesting that, mentally or sometimes people find ultras although longer distance, easier than a marathon. But I think it comes down to that terrain and the muscle groups that you're using and everything.
yeah, yep. And even from a nutrition perspective, depending on what your pace is, if it's 3 hours or 4 hours for a marathon, whereas an ultra is like an all day, you kind of got that difference in food that you can enjoy as well. Like you're not so that anxiety about I've got to be on pace. In an ultra, okay, yeah, I am going to walk. I am going to make sure this nutrition gets down and it's comfortable, and then go again. Whereas I feel like on that marathon, we don't allow that to happen. So
You're not eating a full sandwich or something.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that first Ironman that you did, what was that like for you? And did you know then and there that was that kind of like a shift that you wanted to do all of these other events, or what was your mindset like?
Yeah, it definitely started out as a bucket list item. Like, just always want to do one. Cool, get that one done. But I don't think I'd even finished it, and I'm like, yes, this is kind of I need to do more. I want to be better at it, and it's very much erasing yourself with Ironmans and ultras. So it definitely was more of my comfort zone because swim, bike, run. I'm not a good runner. I can be on the bike all day. I used to be quite reasonably fast on the bike, and I've lost that over the years, but I still got good pace on the flat. And the swim, even though I'm a bigger guy, I enjoy. So especially if it's rough water, I seem to do better. So Cairns Ironman, big headwinds. Everyone talks about the train, but it's a vibe as well. So I hadn't even finished, and I'm like, this is awesome. And then you're in the recovery tent, and everyone's there, and that culture, which you tend to get more with the ultras and the Ironmans as well. So that they do suck you in, and you do want to do more. And
Okay. What was it like? Because how many Ironmans have you completed?
3.
3. Okay. So from that, I'm interested, like breaking down. Let's stay on topic with Ironman first. That first Ironman to that second one. What did you learn, and what did you do differently training for that second one?
I knew the course. Definitely knew the course better. I knew the headwinds were going to be there. So it's that mental preparedness that you know what's coming. Interestingly enough, though, I didn't train as well I think I was a little bit more complacent,
Right.
which was, I've learned that now.
Yeah.
You know, these long distance things, you just can't be complacent. Yeah, they'll bite you in the back. Um, Nutrition was definitely better, but I also think because I didn't know what I was getting in for originally,
Yeah.
I gave it better thought, and I'd used my history of training
Yeah.
to get me through. So yeah, that was. I think my first Ironman was my best one
Yeah.
so far. Um, it's definitely not a job done. I want to go back and do better, and put everything that I've learned to use.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I did 2 Cairns, and then I've done a Bustleton.
Okay. Yeah.
Cairns, I kind of feel like I've got unfinished business there. I want to
Okay.
get a little bit faster, and it suits me
Yeah.
as well. So,
Okay. What does a Monday to Monday look like for you when you're training for an Ironman specifically?
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people don't quite like the distance is a massive distance
Yep.
that you have to cover, and it's 3 activities. And I think people out there that might be a marathon runner and don't really follow Ironman and follow triathlon might
Yep.
not fully grasp like the dedication, the time it takes sometimes. So
Yep.
what did it look like for you, I guess?
I joined a swim squad.
Okay.
I think that's really important. To try and do swimming by yourself is really hard. Biking and running, yes, you can do that yourself if you've got the regiment, etc. So for me, I use a lot of my daily commute to and from work as part of my training structure. So yeah, 3 swim squads a week is probably, if you want to be reasonably comfortable in the water, to get through if you have rougher conditions or you're trying to battle a current, you've got to give it the due justice there. For the bike, it's a mix of a bit of terrain, depending on which course you're going into, because you've got to be able to handle those headwinds. If you're just doing outer harbour loops, it's all good, but that one day that you're trying to go through a little bit of rolling hill and you've got a headwind and it's raining or something, so you need to train for that condition. Running, again, I use my commute, so I try and do a couple of long easy runs. And then the weekend is where you do your more specific training. So, you're going to target a bit of tempo work, or is it a bit of hill work or whatever. That's where I kind of get into it. But in terms of hours per week, 12 to 16 hours a week for me was sort of a reasonable number. Like marathon, you don't go and run a marathon as part of your training. You tend to do sort of that 20 to 30K range. You got to do a little bit of length to practice your nutrition, so that when you can feel that energy level starting to drop and like, okay, how do I dig myself out of this hole? What nutrition's going to work for me on the day? Because if you don't do the long distance, then you don't know what's going to work. But then also, I spent a lot of time prior to Ironman when I did the 24-hour road races, really figuring out and dialing in what my protein tolerance was. So as well as getting a carb target, I had a sports nutritionist who gave me a protein target. And the first 24-hour I tried that and it just failed miserably. And so I spent about 3 months just out at night doing long distance and trying to figure it out. And now that I know that protein target, like, it doesn't really vary much. So now I can work that into my normal structure. So, yes, you got the 3 disciplines as part of your Ironman training, but it really is nutrition as the 4th discipline, as they say. Absolutely. You got to work on that.
Yeah.
So.
What worked for you? Like how did you fit the
Yeah.
nutrition in? Was it gels? Was it food? What was that like for you?
I'm pretty light on the gels.
Okay.
Like, I've tried most of them, and I can't handle the thicker consistency ones. My go-to at the moment is Endura, but I'm going to mix that up again. I'm going to try. Like, you just got to keep trying new things. And then I use Cliff Blocks, Cliff Bars, but I cut them up to small portions. So I use a smaller portion more often. And like, as soon as you start putting Cliff Bars in, you've got to be careful again that protein starts to lift up. And my tolerance is only about 8 grams per hour. So it's really easy to hit that. And so you've got to look at, okay. And again, my carb tolerance, like, I can only digest about 80 grams of carbs per hour for my size, I need to be hitting 100, 110. So I'm always in that deficit. So it's about managing that and trying to always get there. So yeah.
What was the struggles, I guess, training for that first and second Ironman? What were things that you had that you didn't realize would be tough that were tough that kind of shocked you?
I actually think it was more work and lifestyle. Like as, amateur athletes, we're all pretty good at trying to, stay focused on the discipline at hand. But life gets in the way, and it's being able to shelter yourself from that and absorb the hits and, okay, yeah, work's been bad this week, right? Don't go all out next week and try and make it up. You can't make up lost sessions, and that's that mental understanding of physiology that really comes into it. Okay, you just got to park that one. Yeah, you had a bad training day. All right, no worries. What's next? So part of that was keeping a diary. Keeping focused. Okay, this is what my target is, and it's like nutrition on the day. Don't vary it. If you've gone out with a specific target, try that. Make sure if it doesn't work, okay, cool. Take your notes and analyze it, review it, and reset out another plan. So life definitely gets in the way. We've all got to work. We're not fortunate enough to be professional athletes. So yeah, the greatest trouble for me was, work gets in the way. So
Yeah. And that's probably a common thing, I think, for a lot of people like, us who are doing it on the side, having work, having life. And that's probably the biggest thing I appreciate there, that you can't make sessions up, like you just said, because I think that's a very common thing that, again, I guess as a clinician, but even as like, someone where I discuss this with friends who are also wanting to do Ironman or do Ironman and training for them. And they're like, oh, well, I missed something. And then like my shin's hurting because I added this. And well, it all adds up, right? Like you can't really make up for lost time, unfortunately, in a sport like this. And I think understanding that can make or break, I think, a lot of times, which is quite interesting, I believe.
Oh, and to add to that is also, if you're going to buy new gear, make sure you program that in as to when you're going to trial it and when you're going to use it. Like, if you're going to go get a new pair of runners, don't do it 2 weeks before your event. Get it 2 months before and build it into your smaller sessions. So, am I going to get shin splints with this new shoe, or, is there suddenly a calf issue that pops up? Like, okay, so it's like anything new, you got to build it into your program. We do that with food, do that with the equipment as well, so.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, you were saying that you tied kind of a lot of your cycling or running into, to and from work and things like that, which is a great, I think, idea. Were you able, or were you needing to do anything on top of that? Like, let's say you had, okay.
Yeah, it definitely, Monday to Friday is it's very structured for me. I don't give my coach much of an option of like, this is all I can do, But then Saturday, Sunday, it's all on, and what coach programs is what I do. So routine is everything as well. So for me, I've got a very set routine Monday to Friday. And just got to let that go on the weekends.
Yeah, that's fair. And what kind of ultras have you done? Like, when did that start, and where did that kind of go?
Yeah, the first ultra was Ultra Trail, so Eurobilla. I think I've done it 4 times. Oh, wow, okay. And then, the Ultraman. So I've done 2 24-hour road races as well. Okay. So I guess you call them an ultra. So yeah, 3 Ironmans, 2 24 hours, 4 ultra trails. And UTA 100, so 5 trails. So,
okay. Yeah. And what was that like, training for something like that versus an Ironman? Like, were you still taking a multidisciplinary approach for training like that, or was it just solely running?
I was doing a lot of gym, like group fitness gym back then. Pulled away a lot from that to do more trails. You just time on feet, you just got to get out. Got a run specific coach for that one, for UTA. Should have done more strength training. My wife's going to be laughing at me for that one because, Nat's always at me about I need to be doing more strength training and just time struggles. But UTA 100 was, again, a lot of a lot of trail runs, a lot of trialing eating of different things as well, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. How do you pack your bag? How do you pack your nutrition? How are you going to do your refuel stops? How you can do, like for me, I was using Gatorade. So do I, at the aid stations, do I have pre-prepared bottles? But I actually went with Ziploc bags with a preset amount, all measured out. So I just had these rubber band packages, and like there'll be like 6 bags of them, and I knew that every hour I'd be having a bottle. So, I ran water in my backpack, and then 2 chest bottles, and the chest bottles of Gatorade, and I just like literally siphoned water out to fill the chest tubes, and that's how I got through the UTA. So,
Okay, there you go. For people listening who don't specifically understand or know a lot about how the ultras work, like the aid stations and things like that, can you break down a little bit of how that all works?
Yeah, so I'll use Eurobilla Ultra. I treat that one, that's more of like a community event. Like you get there and there's, the best way I can describe it is your uncle and your aunt and your grandma are there at the aid station, and there's all this food. And I remember running into the one just opposite the freeway, the national park there, and there was these chocolate chip mud cakes. And I just grabbed one and left, and I was just eating that on the trail. It was just fantastic. So, plenty of food out at those ones. UTA 100 was very specific because your crew goes with you. Like there's 3 aid stations that you can meet up, or 4, I think. And then there's bag drops as well. So you've got to be very targeted on your bag drops. Thinking about what you're going to consume every hour, where that is in the race. Am I going to want fresh socks? Am I going to want fresh shoes? So it's amazing the amount of gear you can use on a 100K. Whereas a marathon, you don't think about those things. You don't need to think about those things. So, and then weather has a huge part to play as well.
What kind of gear for the ultra, and we'll go back to Ironman, but what kind of gear for the ultra were you testing throughout training that you decided to use for the actual event?
Big one is the right chest pack. You got to get the right pack size. Like UTA, there's a lot of gear, mandatory gear that you've got to carry. Jumpers, gloves, full bottoms and tops for thermal gear, and that consumes space. So trying to get that, package it up, and then learning to run with it. Running with a pack, does it fit well? Does it rub anywhere? All those sorts of little things. And then we actually tested out poles. Poles are quite a almost controversial topic, but you get there and you see a lot of people using them. Luckily, my mate and I trialed them. We learnt that we could benefit from them. And the poles were fantastic. They just give you that extra stability when you're doing the uphills or the downhills to take a little bit of the load off the quads. Especially when it's wet and it's dark and you can't quite see where your foot's going to land. Just having those 2 poles does help. And then learning how to quickly tuck them away, So again, it's not just learning to run, learning to eat. It's how do you pack your bag? Where do you store your nutrition? You got all these pockets and pouches. You don't want to be trying to reach for them or having to have your mate try and grab stuff for you during the race. So,
What was conditions like?
We had temperature-wise, it was all over the place. I think there was 2.5, 3 hours in. We were all waiting on this crest to get through a narrow portion, and there was this long queue of people. I think we were standing around for about 24, 30 minutes. And that got really cold really quick. Even though the sun was out, we were on this ridge line, so, very exposed. 30 to 40K, that section there was very wet. So, shoes were saturated. There was no escaping, having to run through creek lines, etc. And then at night, it got really cold. I think we did have rain. I can't really remember now. It's, a year ago. It was all sorts of temperatures. Like you do run in T-shirt right through to having jumpers on, and you're running with your wet weather gear on. And I learnt during my Eurobillas actually how to temperature regulate using gloves. So gloves and hat, that makes, you don't need to throw a jumper on and off all the time if you've got gloves, for example. or is that a hat? What works best for you? So yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's quite interesting because how long is an event like that?
We did UTA 119 hours 20. And out of that, I think, I can't remember what our stationary time was. It was a reasonable amount of time that you're stationary, but um, our first major aid station was 56K, and that there, I think we walked out just under 30 minutes. And that's like, wow, okay, don't do that again. So you can lose a lot of time on the ultras in the aid stations, especially if family or friend there, because you kind of like just want to hang out a little bit more, you know. So, and that's where your support crew are really important. Like, you know, encourage them to encourage you out quickly at those events, because you can lose time, you can get cold and lose that rhythm. But then the intermediate checkpoints, you know, you go, you get your gear bag, quickly shove your stuff in, grab some water or whatever it is that you need, and get out. You know, so you don't want to be standing around for those. So it's a mix depending on the event. But yeah, UTA is awesome.
Yeah.
For that part.
Because I guess like, you know, if you have a road runner, like someone like me who does road running, I hate trails.
Yeah, okay.
Like we can't fathom, like I could never fathom being out on a course for more than, you know, 42 kilometers or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's like quite interesting to me. What was it like training then for a road race or like a marathon?
Luckily, like we live relatively close to the beach, so we just run along the esplanade. You know, so you still get your headwinds, etc., tailwinds, dodging and weaving a little bit, which you know you got to do in those marathons. But you're not dealing with traffic. For me, getting away from traffic is important. Getting away from lights, you know, that interruption, that false. Like when I run home, for example, there's lots of road crossings. And you can look at your average pace if you've been pausing your watch, and it gives you a real false sense of achievement. But yeah, for me, it was just lots of flat runs and trying to pick up the pace that little bit, learning how to drink at that faster pace as well. So
How do you pull yourself back from overtraining? Like, because I assume with the Ironman, the ultras, the marathons, there's parts of the time where you know your body can be feeling it, or you know you need that rest, or you know. So how do you pull yourself back, or did you have to pull yourself back ever? And how do you kind of combat the overtraining side of things?
it's easy with multi-sport because you're training for three disciplines. You know, so swim, yes, it's a full body movement. It'll burn you up, but it's not high impact. So that's a benefit. Um, so really, it's running for me that I have to be cautious on. Um, but if you've got sore calves or your hamstrings starting to flare up or something, you can jump into pool. So I think marathon is harder in that aspect. Is that it is single. Like yes, you can go to the gym and you can do the strength work to try and free that body part up. But at the end of the day, it's a single discipline event. Whereas multi-sport, you've got that flexibility to work around it and keep your cardio. The last thing you want to do is lose your cardio.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And what kind of gear, let's go back to triathlon, what kind of gear did you test out in that event? Of course, there's the bike and all of that kind of stuff, but what other things did you feel like worked out for you that you took into an Ironman?
Um, the first on bike, you got to get a bike fit done. Get a proper, do a bit of investigation, find the right place to do a bike fit. $200 is that's very cheap one. $300 I think was the last one that I did, and it took about 4 hours, and I've ended up with a really nice, relaxed, comfortable bike fit, which means you can be in the aero position for longer. You're far more comfortable. You're less likely to be pulling up sore, especially when you jump off the bike, to then get into a run. But it's no different to running shoes. There's so many different types around now. The width is really important. Don't what's your stability like? What's your ankles like? Do you need a more stable foot, or can you handle that softer pad under your foot where your ankle stability has got nice control? So swimming, your wetsuit plays a huge part. A lot of people go sleeveless. I run with full sleeve. I was very fortunate when I was doing the Westlake series a long, long time ago. I actually won a wetsuit as part of a random draw. It was fantastic. And it was called I think it was a slow turtle or something. It was like, it was just, but it was a brilliant wetsuit, you know. So, and then you've got the 2XUs and the Zone 3s and all those. Um, Everyone finds their brand that works well for them, you know, their shoulder mobility, you know, what's that neckline, because, you know, you can end up with some pretty big chafing if you're not careful. But then it's the little things like, especially like running, you'd be familiar with, well, you know, what lubes do you need? Um, you know, if you're running for 19 hours or 20 hours, you want to have that anti-chafing cream that you can trust and rely upon. And is it a stick? Is it a tub? Is it just out of a tube? Like, and you might use different ones for different events or different conditions, you know. So
Yeah. Lots to think
oh,
about.
there's lots.
Yeah. How did you go with because what I found about doing like my first I guess triathlon was those Westlake ones as well.
Yeah.
And it's very technical. Like a lot of people don't realize like the little things like you can't touch your bike and you know without your helmet and like
Yeah.
those little things. So how did you find all of that and what did you find shocking when it comes to like how a triathlon or an Ironman actually works?
Look, I'm very rules based, so I'm a rules person. So for me, I've read the rule book, and you know, like to me, it wasn't a surprise. And you watch a few of these, like the T100s on TV at the moment, you can see these elites, and they get caught out because they're in the adrenaline, they're in the moment. So I'm a visual trainer person as well, so I visualize things. So I visualize a triathlon before I even go and compete it. Step through the transition in my head, you know, what am I going to put on first? Okay, yeah, helmet first, then shoes, or do other shoes on the bike, you know, and then train it and test it, you know. So test how you lay out your transition gear, you know. And I, especially with the West Lakes ones, that used to get really hot, some of those hot days. So I used to, you know, have half frozen bottles under my towel and I'd put a crappy towel on top and I'd pick the most god awful colours you could find because that towel stood out when I was running down the lanes, you know, because everyone's bikes start looking the same, and especially when you're like, oh, and then when I get there on the day, I walk the transition. I make sure, okay, yep, I'm on row 3 or whatever it is, so that when I am coming out and I'm trying to get my wetsuit off and I'm struggling because one arm's not quite getting out, I'm still running to the right spot. And then I've practiced that transition, so you know I don't forget the sunnies or I don't forget whatever it is that I need. So, yeah, practice.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Did you do like how many sessions do you do like brick runs or like sessions where you do multiple sessions in a day? Like how did that work for you back when you were training for Ironman?
yeah, I'm a big multiple, especially when you're running multi-sport. You can do like 2-3 sessions in a day. For me, if I'm like when I've been wanting to concentrate on my running, I actually do double runs in a day, shorter. I'm not looking to test nutrition on those days. I'm testing technique. So you know, if you're going out and doing a 5 to 8K run, you can then back it up in the afternoon and do another 5 to 8K run because you know you're looking at your technique or you're looking at how you pull up. But then, yeah, I'll ride to and from work and then go for a run or something like that, or you swim in the morning, ride to work, run home. You know, so you can get the mileage in the hours without really taxing the body, so that you wake up in the morning and you're not fighting that really fatigued body.
What were you swimming pool? Were you out in the open water? Was that like for you?
Yeah, majority's pool. I'm lucky that I've always enjoyed open water as well. So living down at Brighton, we've got really good site. You know, when we're swimming towards Seacliff, we've got the mountain range in the background. When we're swimming to Brighton, we've got the beautiful jetty with the pole on the end. So I love getting out in the open water, but through winter it's just too cold. You got to go back to the pool.
That's I think like open water is quite interesting too because some people refuse to do that and they only find events out of the ocean as well, which is a you know interesting thing. But what was it like for you? I guess when we're going back to Ironmans and ultras, what was race day like in the morning? Because I find that quite interesting. Everybody has like a different morning routine.
Yeah.
Like when did you wake up? How far advanced did you wake up? What was your nutrition like, and
Yep.
kind of your process there?
I think it was about 2.5 hours before race start was wake up.
Yeah.
Um, Pretty cool, calm. Like everyone gets up in the house, and Nat especially, she loves having a proper breakfast and taking it easy, and coffee and the usual. What we do most mornings is what we're going to do on race day morning. Don't change things up. But then take that, instead of having the banana as part of the breakfast, have the banana closer to the race start. So you can space out, maximize what you're taking in early, but then space it out and keep topping up the fluids as you get in there. Um, get to the transition. I tend to get there halfway between the open times. Like they do have an open and a close time that you've got to be in and out by. Go in there about half time, because then you got enough time. If you find you got a flat tire or you got something crazy, you can fix it. You don't want to be leaving at the last minute and finding. I always pump up my tires on the morning of, so overnight, you don't want to be pumping your tires up and then leaving them, not checking them in the morning. It's just the simple things. Especially bike tires, they tell you to pump them up every day, because they're not like a car tire where they're designed to stay up for long periods. But also you need to be able to adjust your tire pressures on the morning of, because if it's suddenly a wet race, you don't want to be running, like I run at 100 psi in the dry. For New Zealand, I actually ran at 135 psi, like really high, because it was dry and I could afford to. In Noosa, which we just did, it was wet, I ran at 85. So you got to be able to adjust things in the morning of. Check your nutrition. Last thing you want is to find that you've jumped on a bike and you've forgotten your nutrition. And then be able to comfortably walk out of transition and then concentrate on the start, not have to think about what did I pack on the bike, because you've gone through the checklist. And then as you walk out, put your anti-chafing cream on, put the wetsuit on, get it zipped up, be comfortable. Maybe do a bit of a practice swim. A lot of the places they have an area where you can go beforehand, and then get in the queue. There's some of the lines are pretty long. Marathons are so big now. Ironmans the same. A lot of competitors. So get in the crew and talk to people around you. They're all probably got the same sort of nervousness as well. And is this your first? How many you done? Some of the people you talk to are fantastic. And it comes back to what we're talking about before, the community.
Yeah. And you meet people from all areas of life too. It's
Yep.
amazing just kind of hearing. And it probably helps calm your nerves slightly as well. It gets your mind off of, oh, I'm about to do this massive task, really.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
What was it like? Because you just did an Ultraman. What was that process like for you? Because that was your most recent thing, I reckon. Yeah.
Yeah, that was same sort of deal. So we were waking up about 4:15 in the morning. Not so regimented, because unlike Ironman where you're doing all three disciplines in one day, day one's just a swim bike, and then day two is just bike, and day three is just run. So, bike was prepped, no worries. Sort of let it know before. I couldn't set my transition up because the way that it works is there's limited space to get all the athletes through. So your crew has to set your bike up for you and set all that up. So it was really easy. Just we walked down there, and you've got to have a team captain. So Alana, she checked me in. I didn't even have to worry. Like that's her job. All I've got to worry about is trying to get my nutrition down. And Nat, my wife, she packed me some pancakes with some maple syrup, and my job was just to eat it and focus. So it's a very different event in that aspect. Ironman it's not for yourself, but you've got to control everything yourself, and you've got to set everything else up. Whereas this one, you've got a crew. Ultraman, you have to have a crew of at least two, support vehicle. They run the event, but there's no aid stations. That's all up to your crew. So your job as the athlete is to be the athlete, and your crew is the crew. It's awesome.
Okay,
So
cool. And because this was the most recent one, you've done plenty of events, Ironmans, ultras,
yep.
things in the past. How did you go into this one feeling? Like, what was your mindset like, and how was your confidence like in this event versus going back to your very first thing that you've ever done?
Um, I was very fortunate. 2 years ago, I actually was crew captain for my good mate Alana when she did it. So I kind of knew what was coming. It wasn't like just rocking up to an event blind and not knowing. So we'd had the race briefing the day before. So we got to meet the other athletes and the dream team, all the organisers. So knowing what was coming, it wasn't so much of a surprise. Yeah, I could visualize what was going to happen. Like I said, I'm a visual person. So, visualize the swim. Did realize the day before that the swim course was different. So, better than finding out in the day. But the other thing is the swimmer has a paddler with them. So I was assigned a youth, female youth paddler. Got to meet her and, you know, trusting my race and a 14-year-old Surfy was awesome. Like, she did an absolutely brilliant job. Just gave her my bag of nutrition and said, right, this is what I'm after. And she's like, yeah, cool, no worries. So it's, very different event. Just yourself with your team.
Yeah. What's a key moment out of everything that you've done? What's a key moment, and I guess the favorite event that you've had?
Um, my favorite event would be my second Ironman where my wife and my son were running around trying to follow me. Um, and Ironman's a really hard spectator sport because the athlete goes out, you don't see him for a few hours. And my son was, I want to say 10 at the time. And they were just running around and I'd find her piggyback here with like just find him at different parts of the course. And that was awesome, So it's the things that you're not expecting that you haven't thought of that actually might surprise you. And that was one for me. Yeah.
Okay. And what's an event going to the opposite side of things? An event that was so difficult you thought you were gonna quit or not finish.
Um, my first 24-hour road race, it was when the Ben Motorsports Park hadn't really been finished yet. So it was really dusty, like the dust storms were shocking. We started out and I'd only got, I was turn 3 of the first lap and my rear cluster just locked up in the chain. And there I am, everyone's riding past me and the swarm of dust. And, mentally you're just like, how do I fix this? And luckily I could manage to get my chain off and retighten the cluster by hand, even enough just to get me through the pits. But that event I wasn't prepared for the fatigue or the conditions. Learned a lot. Um, didn't get the distances that I was keen for, so it's very hard to then get back on the bike after you've had a snooze and like, oh, what am I doing? So that was a tough one.
Yeah. What does maybe get into like your pacing strategies for events like this? Like,
Yep.
how do you decide how you want to pace an ultra or an Ironman? Like, are they different strategies for different events, or how does that all work?
Definitely different paces. So ultras for me, it's very much power based. So I'd want for UTA 100 worked with a running coach and we found what my power output was. We got those little stride power meters. I don't know if you've come across them. So if I was running above 300 watts, that was too much. Pull it back. We found that 280 was really good. So if I was running on the flat, that was my target. If I was going up a hill, walking, all right, make sure you're over 200. If you're walking up a hill and it's 140, then you're just taking it too easy. So it wasn't about heart rate; it was very much power. With Ultraman though, it was more about heart rate. So when I was on the run, keeping under 140 beats per minute, so if I was starting to go over that, I knew I'd start to creep, and I knew that I'd be using that extra energy as well. So 140 is just a nice, easy number, easy to look at and watch and not overcomplicate it. Because, again, anything with terrain, you can't use pace. It just doesn't work. UTA 100 was very much like that. We didn't. What's a 6-minute pace if you've got terrain? You know, like and at the end of the day, it's about finishing, and you got to power yourself through it. So therefore, power or heart rate is what you got to watch.
Are you always outdoors when it comes to cycling? Do you use smart trainer or always outdoors? Okay.
No. I've got a smart trainer. As well.
Yeah.
I am a wet weather sook.
Okay.
So the rain I really struggle with. So when it was raining in Noosa, we had 68 mil of rain during the ride on day 2. Mentally, that was probably the hardest part for me for that whole race, was just dealing with the rain. Got an indoor trainer. Set myself up with a nice table, laptop, fans, the whole lot. We've got a nice treadmill now, which I haven't really had a chance to use yet. Can't stand the treadmill personally, but like anything to get you through.
Sometimes you have to.
Yeah, that's right.
What are some brands like bikes or shoes or things like that you've found you've consistently used years after years that you quite like?
I've got my Specialized shoes. I think I'm on my 3rd pair. They're awesome. Gels are Endura. I've tried the Goose. I was on Goose for a while. And then tried a few others, but just the Enduras seem to they just slide through pretty quick and easy. Except for when you got wet hands or sweaty hands, I can't rip them open. That's probably the biggest struggle. I'm on a Canyon bike at the moment, and I know you were looking at one.
I was looking at one the other day.
My Canyons, for what the price point is, the value is awesome. So I highly recommend there. I'm running in. What am I running with? Oh, Hockers. Okay. Tried some different Hockers, and I got a pair of Asics as well. But Hockers on my my go-to for the longer distance.
So. We discussed lifestyle like a bit briefly, but when you have, let's say, lots going on in life and you're training for an event, how do you manage the training and what do you restructure? Because, I think family's everything, and, work sometimes is more important, especially for, again, people like us that doing this on the side. So how do you restructure your training to try and manage it all, really?
First thing I do is I tell people about what I'm doing, because I found, like, especially with work, family and friends as well, if they don't know what you're doing, then they don't know why you're ghosting them, So your friends and family will be your biggest advocates. They'll support you. So if you let them know what your goals are, and look, so I've got a 12-week block. I just got to get through it. We'll do my events on this date. Let's catch up after that. Cool. And that kind of just clears your path. It means, your weekends are your weekends. You're not trying to appease, because some of us are people pleasers and we don't like saying no. And so there's that. And like Nat, she's very much, friends and family are very important in terms of social interaction. So we can't just go weekends without seeing people as well, because it's kind of like the cabin fever. Nat's got to see people, which is great. Whereas I'm quite happy to be isolated and by myself. So, so we kind of just mix the two together and just get through. But probably changing gym lifestyle is one where we definitely noticed it, because I pulled right back from group fitness to do my endurance stuff, whilst Nat was still trying to, with Hyrox and that she was doing, it still worked for her. So it's finding that balance there. That's a tough one.
What does prevention and what does strength look like for you? Like, are you doing any gym work or?
I'm not doing enough.
Okay.
So typical older male, my calves have always been an issue. Luckily for me now that they've started to be not my issue. So strength is important. Mobility is probably the bigger one. Being an office-based job, that upper thoracic's always been tight. So even though I'm training, it doesn't free it up. No. Like that mouse position at the computer is terrible. so yeah, I need to do more strength,
Mm.
but strength mobility,
Yeah.
and trying to do like 15-minute mobility session after breakfast before I then go for a ride or something is.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like the older you get, the more you got to warm up before a session as well,
Yeah.
and how you start off in the session. You
Yeah.
can't just go hell for leather. So
Yeah.
um, it's adapting your session to how you feel,
Yeah.
not jumping a bike and
Yeah.
expecting to be at 35k an hour straight up.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll warm up. I'll get there and then get into it. So
What do you think would be good for you? Because I think that's a very interesting thing. Because when you're training for, let's say, like a half Ironman or 73 versus a full, or you're training for like a marathon versus an Ironman, like when I'm training for a marathon, I can physically fit in a lot more strength, if you know what I mean. Like I just have more time, right?
yeah,
Whereas when you're adding a bike and a swim, you kind of have to give something up, and I think it's better to give the gym up than it is to give the bike or the swim. I guess with you, when you're training for a longer event and you have to put in the work for that event, what do you think is best for you when it comes to, you know, training in the gym or strength training or whatever it might be?
um, I'll say what I've. So I used to give up the strength, and I did. Yeah, I definitely gave up the strength in favor of concentrating on the disciplines. Um, I'm going to try and not do that this time around.
Okay.
So this time around, I'm going to try and get back in the gym and do 2 sessions a week. Um, but yeah, at times always going to be a struggle. I need to do something different because I definitely noticed not having that mobility and strength impacted my performance. So whilst it's an easy one to give away, but I think it's the one we shouldn't be giving away. And yeah, I just got to learn how to fit it in.
Yeah, because it is hard. Like I think for a lot of people, like for me, I'm training for my first 73 ever, and again, I've only ever the longest event that I've done is a full marathon, and with that, I can hit the gym maybe 5 days a week and still comfortably fit everything in. Whereas I find for the 73, even though let's say the run portion is a lot less than what a full marathon is, I'm still having to do a lot more bike and swim, which is a new thing. So I've taken down my gym to about 3 times a week, which is quite odd for me because I'm used to training 5 times a week in the gym always.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can be in that boat where, like you're saying, the first thing to naturally give up is the gym, but it's probably not the best thing to give up as well because it's great for that prevention side of things. And if you go see in physio, like the first thing that I'm going to tell you is, okay, well, what do you do in the gym? So it's kind of a catch take in a sense in that regard as well.
I think if I'd recommend that you look at how when you fit that gym session in. So we talk about fatigue running or fatigue biking. It's about, is the gym session about just building strength, or is it about strength and mobility? Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then what can you work around it? So, is it that you do a strength session, like a shorter, more compact, targeted session before you then go and do a short run, so that your total session time might be still what you were going to do for your run, but you've now got a bit of strength training in there beforehand. I think a lot of us overtrain our distances. I talked before that you've got to do the long sessions to train the nutrition, but a lot of people think that they've got to be pushing out these big 20+K runs all the time to do a marathon. It's like, no, pull it back. You're missing the point. Yeah, do maybe 1 or 2 long sessions a week, but you don't have to do all your long sessions. You don't have to do all your sessions as long. So
That's quite key. I did something similar 2 or 3 years ago for the Sydney Mara. I think it was a very busy time or year at work or something, and instead of running, like typically I do about 5 runs a week, but instead of doing that, I pulled it back to 4 because I just couldn't do that fifth with work commitments. And how I got around it and how my coach helped me get around it is we strategically did exactly that. We did a strength session, immediately before the day before, so that we were running fatigued the next day. And yeah, the distances were less and my weekly total was less, but I think that year, I don't know if I PB'd, but I did, like for Sydney being quite hilly as well. I was quite pleased with the result. And I think like you were just mentioning, like strategically trying to get the gym in, um, because you can do it, even if it's just the 30 minutes like you were saying. I think that's another big thing is we often think, oh well, I need to go for 60 minutes at the gym, or I need to go for a 45-minute session to get something out of it. Well, if you put in the right amount of sets and you put in the right amount of weights and effort, you could get by with 25, 30 minutes top, really.
And then that's your warm up done as well.
Yeah.
So you're
And then
straight
you're
into it.
exactly. What's next for you? Is there another event coming up, or?
Yeah, I've registered for Yeovil Ultra again, so
Okay.
end of September.
Okay.
So that's already registered.
Yeah.
I've also registered for Ultraman again next year.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely not unfinished business. I just want to do better.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I'm sort of looking at Nat Price. Nat doesn't know this one yet. So, I'd love to do a 100 miler. I just think another bucket list type. I've had a couple of friends do it now, and it's just that next level again. You're starting to talk some real endurance numbers there. But yeah, then maybe a few destination events. Like we were talking about doing, I don't know if you've heard about the 33.3K swims. Like they do them in Croatia and Spain and like destination events. So yeah, that's definitely on the cards.
Okay. Has everything you've been doing Australia?
I've done a New Zealand triathlon.
right.
I got into the World Age Group Championships 2016. So that's the only thing I've competed offshore.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
What was that process like, going overseas and taking your equipment overseas and everything?
Yeah, not really that much different to an Australian one. Like
Okay.
traveling to New Zealand is
Yeah.
like traveling to Sydney almost in some
Yeah.
respects. It's just that added concern of packaging it all properly and make sure you don't leave anything behind. So I think destination events where you might struggle to get replacement gear is probably like we talk about with your derailleur, the hanger for your bike. Always pack a spare because you don't know what the supply chain's like on some of those events. But yeah, like most people are pretty comfortable with traveling with their bikes now. So
That's a good point. What kind of things do you think people need to know about when it comes to, like, if you have a breakdown or things that you need to know about fixing, at a bike or stuff? What are some common things that people should know?
look,
How to do
number
themselves?
one is getting your chain right. Like a drop chain is really easy. How do you quickly spin it back on with limited? Trying to get as less on your fingers as possible. There's ways to fool the gears to get the chain back on. Tire, replace the tire. That's a big one. But then it's more just learning what does a flat tire feel like. So learning about what the issue is before it actually happens, because you can pick up like oh, my tire is starting to go low. Okay, I need to look for somewhere to pull over, because the last thing you want is the tire to actually go on you and then you crash out. So bike handling skills are a big one. Like a lot of people, I think, don't appreciate bike handling skills. And if there's rubble on the road ahead, can you go over it or do you have to go around it? Sand is another big one. You can wash out pretty easily. Learning, do you push the bike forward or do you get the weight over the front wheel? Like those sorts of things. So it's not just all about mechanical. It's about handability. At the Ultraman, 3 people crashed out. There was 2 major crashes, 2 or 3. People ended up in hospital. Like unfortunately, the worst injury was a guy with a fractured eye socket who was a pilot for a blind cyclist as well. But it's the last thing you want to do is have a crash. So a flat tire you can crash out on. So if it's a burst, then there's no preemptive on that. But feeling a flat when it's low, like what 40, 30 psi feels like, you can feel it being squishy. You don't want to turn that wheel, because you'll wash out, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for coming on. This
Thank
was
you.
great. I
Cheers,
think
mate.
people will get a lot out of this, and it's interesting because there's so many endurance sports out there, and they're all quite different. And hearing kind of the breakdown of all, I think people can appreciate a lot, because a lot of us a lot of us stick to, one thing,
Mm.
whether it be your road running or whether it be your trail running or whatnot. And until I think a very common thing is, oh, I can't run anymore and then you adopt something new, or, so to have multiple avenues of things to do can be quite beneficial for you as a person. And I think if anybody gets anything from today, it's maybe try something
Mm.
different, because
Yeah.
again, like if you can't run for, let's say, 6 months because you have an injury, well, what are you going to do, right? And
Yeah.
you pick up swimming or you pick up cycling or something else, you can keep your endurance up, and you can at least maybe, spark some interest in an Ironman or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, thank you for coming
No,
on. This
thank you
was
very
great.
much.
Yes.
Awesome.